Hello and welcome to the Walker Art Center and the Walker Cinema. My name's Patricia Ledesma Villon and I'm the Assistant Curator of Moving Image here at the Walker. Thank you for joining us for Monster and Me, the video work of Cecelia Condit. Tonight's, again, as I always say, a very special night here in the Walker Cinema, as tonight we're here to celebrate the work of longtime, multi-decade video artist and filmmaker Cecelia Condit. Over the course of 4 decades, artist Cecelia Condit's video work has dissected the psychologies of the feminine, the suburban, and the natural worlds. Her 1983 work, Possibly in Michigan, brought to new audiences in recent years by its vast recirculation on social media, reminds us of the dark possibilities within the exterior and interior worlds of women and their experiences. Its resurgence alongside her recent work speaking to ongoing forms of internal strife and how one encounters and navigates it in the world. This selection of Condit's work, which we're watching here tonight, traces ideas the artist has explored throughout her career and includes a premiere of 2 recent works. Cecelia Condit's video work is notable for placing a subversive spin on the traditional mythology of women in film and the psychology of sexuality and violence. Exploring the dark side of female subjectivity, her work has been described as feminist fairy tales, focusing on friendships, age, and the natural world. For this program, we'll watch 6 of her works made throughout her career, from work made in the early 1980s to the present day. This includes titles Beneath the Skin, audience favorite Possibly in Michigan, and Suburbs of Eden. Then a shift to more recent work with 2015's Pulling Up Roots, and then finally ending with 2 new recent works made in 2025, A Parable of Now and Monster in Me. Since 1981, Cecelia Condit's videos have created heroines whose lives swing between beauty and the grotesque, innocent and cruelty, youth and fragility. She has shown internationally in festivals, museums, and alternative spaces, and is represented in collections including the Walker, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and the Centre Pompidou in Paris, amongst others. She has earned awards at film festivals as well as grants from the Guggenheim, the American Film Institute, and the National Endowment for the Arts, and she is a professor emerita at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where she served as the director of the graduate program for 30 years. And as a bonus surprise, she lives here in Minnesota, which I think a lot of people didn't know about. Yes. Thank you again for joining us, and please stick around for a post-screening conversation with me and Cecelia afterwards, and we'll have some time for audience questions as well. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Cecelia Condit.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to see you all. I want to thank Patricia for curating this program and for placing me here tonight. I also want to thank the other people who are in the Moving Image department here at the Walker. I want to thank Pablo and Mackenzie for your support in bringing me here. I have just a few other thanks. I think the Walker is a simply amazing museum, and this is simply an amazing state. So I want to say how proud I am to be up here tonight, because really, it's a good moment for me. I want to thank, I don't ever usually get a chance to thank the composers that have worked on the work, so I just want to name the ones, because otherwise you will just gloss over them as though they're nothing, but they're like some of the things that really make my work, and otherwise they wouldn't be. So I wanted to thank, in Beneath the Skin, I have the Gayettes, Alice Malloy and Karen Skladany, and then in Possibly in Michigan, Karen Skladany did the music and wrote the Cannibal song. When Pulling Up Roots, Renato Umali did the music for that. And in the last 2 new pieces, A Parable of Now, Monster and Me, Isaac Sherman composed the music for it. So I work with people usually a number of different times. And Stephen Vogel did the music for Suburbs of Eden.
All right, good evening. Thank you for sticking around. So we're gonna chat for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then there's gonna be some time to take questions from the audience. We'll have ushers bringing mics through the aisles, so please wait for the mic, and then we'll also, we'll chat after. I'm speechless. I'm sure many people in the audience are as well. I don't really know where to start, but I do know where to start. Well, first off, Cecelia, I just want to thank you for your years of your work, for being here in the cinema tonight. I think your work weighs heavily, particularly in the moment. And I think just given the context of experience that people have throughout their lives, I think that's really very much a given in your work, and I think that warrants being stated. But you and I are going to talk more about this as well. So thank you, Cecelia.
Thank you.
I guess how this is going to work is I have some questions, nothing too curveball-y. But I want to start by mentioning the subversive spin on female representation that your work has been very much read through, or perhaps even one of many ways to enter your work. So I think given that this program expanded upon, just different areas of your work over the decades, I want to start with your early video works from the 1980s, thinking about the tools you use to conduct these modes of subversion. And one way that you look at that is through narrative, particularly pointing at the narration that you use in the early three works of this program, but then you also use narration as well in your later works, as we all know. With that in mind as the first question, I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about how you position yourself as a narrator, touching on your origins in the 1980s, perhaps even earlier to even today.
That's a pretty big, broad brush stroke. I think when I started working in video, I had never done anything like that before. So it wasn't as though I went to art school to study how to make films. I didn't know. I took photography, which I found out I wasn't as good as the other people who were in the class with me, which was a very big surprise to me. And I realized I had better change mediums. And so I went to a medium where I could tell a story. And I found that when I did Beneath the Skin, first of all, I had a real story to tell. I mean, that was one of those, if I could call it a gift, it was. It landed in my lap and blew me out of the water. And I would walk into rooms with people, and I would know that I had been dealing with murders in a huge way that nobody else in the room probably was. And it was very isolating for me. So I would have dreams, but it also was almost like the culmination of, like when I say in the piece, if I courted violence too much more, I would get myself seriously hurt. So that was the top of the iceberg, where I was truly trying to figure out who to be in a world where I looked absolutely, in my opinion, insane. And I realized when I was doing Beneath the Skin, and then possibly, because I wasn't finished with the subject, I felt that I had a lot to say about murder. And I knew it intimately. And it shaped me. So I was teaching then. I was a regular professional. I knew that I couldn't work many days a week because I was epileptic. So college teaching at that time was a much simpler job. I would go and I could teach 3 days a week, and then I would never have seizures. If I worked 4 days, it was questionable. It was 5 days, I was cooked. So I managed to do this. When I was able to teach, I started having this sense about myself, because my life be feeling a little bit irregular, that I could be an artist because I could be crazy, or have a strange sense of reality, or not have a very good sense of reality, or not really having anything that was stable in my world at that time to hold on to that had could grab me except for my work. And that was a huge transition that I went through. So I noticed that I can talk about my life, and that's something that I can't run out of thoughts for. And that was huge. So beneath the skin, I'm talking. And possibly in Michigan, I decided I had, Karen sang, and she was fun. And, and Jill Sands, who I call it the Jill Sands trilogy, she was deep and beautiful. And she gave me all the support, in many ways, a lifetime of artistic support. I mean, I disappeared for 20 years, and then I reconnected with all my friends. It was a disappearing act that I did, and it was 20 years. But I kept making work then. I don't know if it was as good, but I did Suburbs of Eden during that period. And that was a piece that got rejected everywhere. It was the biggest rejection after all my other work that I couldn't imagine getting so rejected. And so then that was another big monstrous thing. People would get so angry that I left her there in the marriage that the video databank said they were going to pull the tape. They couldn't stand how angry we were. They feel like they were giving counsel to these people that I had left this woman in this marriage. And of course, I felt like it was the most realistic thing. I felt like in that piece, I started to get possibly, actually, from the very beginning, I feel like I have a certain depth in the work. So that I talk, but I say something and then I sort of like look at it from another angle. Like, this violence is not the girl's idea, like violence is almost always, not always, but it's easier to sum it up that's from them as opposed to from women's idea. But then I say in the piece, well, the women had, it was their idea. So instantly I'm kind of messing with people's minds and people's perception, which was very early, because at that time I didn't think of, am I talking too much?
No, I mean, I let you talk because I feel like you're really building on a lot of great threads here. I mean, one thing I was going to mention just listening to you talk is I think what's interesting about your narration is that there's an element of subjectivity, obviously, in your work, but a lot of these experiences are obviously very universal experiences. Mm-hmm. And maybe if you wanted to touch a little bit more on that, just the duality of the subjective, universal storytelling.
Mm. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm a storyteller. I tell stories about women's lives, by and large. That has always been my grounding. And I don't seem to find any other person to be other than that person. So that's the type of storyteller I am. And in my early work, I was starting to realize that was the case, not because I thought of it that way. I found that people called me a feminist, and my work got written about by feminist writers. So it became very clear to me that, yes, indeed, there's no reason to be anything else. I felt that your work tells you who you are, my work tells me who I am, and writers tell me who they think I am. And then that becomes a looking at me that's very different than just me working, right? Because I work and I feel like I have things I need to say, but then the world looks at work and it has something else to say about me or something to think about me. And then people write. And then I put it on, YouTube. And then that's where a lot of people have something to say. They do.
I'm going to backtrack a little bit and talk a little bit more about perhaps genre. to just another thing to really dive into in your work. Suburbs of Eden is a melodrama. One can consider it such. It draws out the tensions of family in the suburbs. And I included it in the program because you still include that distinct flavor of narrative structure, but then also very much the flavor of the macabre that you bring in your work with the Adam and Eve references, but then also the whimsy and the musical. And I think that's obviously something you and I are going to talk about. So one thing that I'm fleshing out in this statement is your work is also notable for translating violence and the macabre through humor, which we, of course, also get in your popular work, possibly in Michigan. But then also, I think all of your work especially. But the question here being, perhaps one can read violence and humor as total opposites, maybe not always existing on the same side of the coin. So how do you navigate the translation between these forms of darkness and humor?
Okay, I think I can do this. I think when I was doing Possibly and Beneath the Skin, I was worried that I could scare people. And so I started working in fairy tales because it seemed like I could get away with the violence that I felt was inside of me, that I had internalized, and it wouldn't be, because fairy tales are violent. And I thought that was a good mode of operation. And then the humor became something in Possibly that I felt like I had to do. I was so confused and so angry and so lost and so, I don't even know what I was. I was just so young. I mean, that was part of my problem.
Do you see these elements of, the pointing out that fairy tales, yes, also include darkness, I think is very much a strong point. Maybe the question is, do you think about the use of humor in your work as a way of processing like really, dark moments?
Mm-hmm. I do. I actually think, in spite of in Monster and Me, when I had said, I cut your arms and legs off and eat this lolly. But in this one, I say, well, he ate my leg and then one and another, and then, he ate my arm and there was still another, and then he ate my body. There was something kind of funny about that. I thought that was pretty funny. It doesn't look as funny as all that. But I thought it was a hoot. Yeah.
Speaking of funny, let's talk about music. Mm-hmm. As many of us know in the room, the sound bits from Possibly in Michigan. I mean, there's laughter emanating from the room. There's clearly, I think, a lot of emotions happening in this room right now. Wouldn't you think, Cecelia? So, on the note of music, many of us here are familiar with the sound bit from Possibly in Michigan. It's become very notable for remixed content online. How do you approach music in your work in relation to the images we're seeing on screen? And just thinking about these elements visually, perhaps just tonally, the emotions. I mean, there's so many different ways I think you can talk about the music, and I'm sure many of us here are very curious.
Okay, even though I use music, I'm pretty naive in regards to music. Fair. I think that sometimes I write music first, like in Suburbs, I wrote the music first. I mean, I wrote the words, and then they were put to music. And then Possibly, I started without music, and the lines like, about putting the poodle in the microwave oven when they were spoken sounded really poorly. And so I realized there must be something that I could do that would make it more interesting. And that was an eye-opener, because that was the first song that I asked Karen if she would put it to music. And when she put it to music, I went, oh, yeah, that was really good. And that's not the song that she really wrote, because she wrote another song, but there was a technical problem when we recorded it. And so when it came to putting it in the piece, it didn't work. So she just in the studio had to make a whole other thing up that had to be in lip sync, which is pretty remarkable. And she did, and this is what came out of her, just the back of her head. She was really gifted.
I think what just lingers in my head, just, you see obviously violent images on screen, the stories of like the experiences that the people in your work that they go through, and then you listen to these songs, and perhaps as an experience-based sort of thing, there's this notion that, again, these two things are total opposite sides of the coin. And maybe do you see that the music perhaps brings a particular attention perhaps to these important stories? Yeah, I don't know, just speaking openly about how one, just emotionally and nervous, like in terms of like the human experience and how one encounters dark moments. I think obviously there's a notion that our nervous systems process dark moments and, our bodies react to things in a way. But again, music that you use is, again, emotionally, tonally, the feeling, the affect is so not it's not the bodily response to dark moments.
No, it's really not. There's some scary music out there, which is very clear. But yeah, no, I really like music. I haven't used music in the last few pieces. I did this piece, I've Been Afraid, which I had put to music, and it's like, I've been afraid of being me, afraid of what you think of me, afraid of who I might be if I could really be me. And that's something that I really like, that piece, because first of all, I sang because there was auto-tune, and that was really a thrill. But those were ways that I could say the things, like some of the lines in the piece went, what is it? What is it? Afraid of what you might do. I've been afraid of what you might do. I might have been afraid I might kill you, which is a big fear, I think. I think it's one of the biggest fears. Being killed is one thing, but killing somebody is really something else. You got to be on a different plane.
On the note of fears, maybe that's a good note to shift into your more recent work, which we watch, in your last 3 films. You and I were sitting next to each other, experiencing these. All of us. Obviously, we're sitting together watching and experiencing this work. And when you and I chatted a while back, through our many conversations, you cited pulling up roots as a real turning point for yourself as an artist. And visually it is. You center yourself in the image. You yourself are performing a navigation of tension. You literally pull roots from the ground. I think there's also an exploration of personal freedom that can be read in this work, in these self-depictions of yourself in the image. And many writers have also discussed and interpreted that to be, I think, a framework I think you also explore in your recent works. So I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about the visual shift into presenting yourself in the work.
Right. I like to be in work. First of all, it's very freeing for me. In that piece, I think I had to be it. Well, first of all, I was in Ireland. I had 3 weeks to shoot this thing. So I found 2 teenagers and 1 sister, 2 sisters. One shot the first few weeks, week and a half, and the other one shot the next week and a half. And they were really good. They had no experience. They did very well, right? I thought so too. Yeah, and also I was comfortable enough to cry. So once I felt like I could do those things, and also there was lines about not knowing who I was or what, I just didn't know who I was. And that was a piece where I really had to again. You know, like you're given so many times to figure out who you are in your life. You really, at least for me, I have real periods where I go, wow, okay, well, this is one of these moments. This is one of those moments when I knew that I had something to say about this woman who was living in some sort of ruin and eating and surviving. You know, she could pull up a beet that she probably grew and a carrot she probably grew. And she was pulling up some weed that turns out to be a noxious weed that grows for 3 weeks in Ireland. And I was there for it, which is very funny. And I was also wearing a dress the same color as those things, too, which is also very funny. But I thought that I needed to say that piece. And I also needed to cry, I think. There was a part of me that was trying to become real. Do you know, like the Velveteen Bunny? Except for that I haven't been so loved on that I've gotten worn out. I've been not so loved on, so I got worn out. It was kind of the opposite of the Velveteen Bunny. So I was in that space that had felt like I had gotten there, and it was not an easy place to be, and so I left. Right? That's what I did. I simply went under the fence and left. And then I was sort of free. Then I could redefine who I was. And so I did.
And you really did redefine yourself, I think, with these last 2 films, right?
I did.
You and I talk about this a lot, but let's talk a little bit more about it too for the audience. So again, with the more recent 2025 works, A Parable of Now and Monster of Me, I really think these 2 works are a matured present-day form of the personal landscapes you really try to traverse in your work, and perhaps I understand it as a sort of self-understanding of yourself as an artist, the things that you've experienced in your life, and you have these thematic elements that you build upon. These thematic elements also appear in your early work as well. You have the affective performance of the little girl, the head, the water, the masks, the doll, and then there's you once again in the vast terrain. But then, in A Parable of Now, you also have these very, very vulnerable images of the legs, the twigs. I think those also are good to point out. This is long again, but and in Monster and Me, there's this phrase, "How did I come out of this unbroken?"
Yeah.
So there's this quality of exploration that you've perhaps conquered the fears you discuss in your earlier work, but perhaps not. And these fears are maybe the experiences that your early narrators speak of. So with that as a grounding, as a prompt, perhaps, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the starting points for these 2 recent explorations in A Parable of Now and Monster and Me.
Okay. They're new. I mean, they are really new. They're just finished. Parable I worked on for a long time. I was moving so much. I just moved so many times in 6 years, 7 years. I just moved and moved and moved and moved. And so that was kind of tiring. But I kept going back to the lake and these 2 little girls over a period of 3 years. And it started with the stick legs, where I felt like I was negotiating some sort of broken reality. Or rather, there was an innocence, but there was sort of like a decrepitness, like an age thing involved in this that was sort of both, which I kind of liked. As I was getting older, I think made a difference to me. But I liked the little girls and realizing that something was broken. And I feel like I was looking at my world and wondering when was the time that I realized that the world was broken. And I came up with a couple of times and when I first realized that things weren't correct. I didn't think of it as broken. I thought of it as something was wrong, but I didn't quite know what it was. And I feel like with these girls, they don't really know what's wrong. because they're just little girls. They're only like 4, 5, and 6 years old. So they didn't know, but there's something about their knowing, right, that I thought was sort of profound in terms of youth. And I feel like in that piece, I became everything in the piece. I became the little girls. I became the water, really. So the water and I are two characters in the piece that I get to play this huge, expansive environmental world, which is a huge ego trip, I'll tell you. I felt that I could give it voice, and I could be that sea, and I could be really powerful, and those little girls could somehow negotiate me as an enormously powerful being with a soundtrack that was so full and so strange. And then in Monster, I picked up, that was a whole other world for me. I found myself, I think, in Northfield feeling rather safe. Safe, like I could walk at night and not worry, or I could go into the woods at night with a friend and not be afraid. And that, I think, got me. And also because I was I had been been in New York where I was living, and I had so much access to art. And so suddenly I didn't have access to art in the same way in Northfield. I wasn't bombarded with major shows. I always came here, so I've never, ever missed shows that have been here at this museum. And for me, it's a very spiritual experience to come here to the museum. But I started looking at my work and looking at it in a different way with Parable, with Monster. I looked at it and I knew that I had a life. This was my life. I'm in control of this life. I also had this work life, that I had done all of this work, and and it wasn't my life, but I would meet people and people would feel like they knew me because they did. They had seen my work, and some of them had seen all my work. And so then I would meet them, we'd have conversations, and I would feel how intimate they were with me. But it was another world that I had created over 45 years. And I had made up a body of work about monsters. And that really got me. So I was trying to figure out who to be in this dream world. So for some reason, the world I was existing in hadn't to do with my head. Like sometimes you can be so clever. This was not a clever piece. This was where I was looking at my life and going, how did I end up to be okay? I have this line that I've always said to myself, if I had known who I'd become, I wouldn't have tried so hard to throw myself away. And I feel like there's something that in Monster, I came through it. How in the world did I land on my feet? People would always, things would happen to me, and sometimes they would be pretty outrageous. And they would say, you'll just put it in your work. You'll land on your feet. You always do. And I always go, but what if I don't? And there's just this startling reality that people see me one way, but I'm really different. Like people see my work, but I'm really quite different. And the duality of like dealing with not only the monsters in my life that have been very real to me, that, you never really quite run away from properly. And then also to have it echoed in my work. So everywhere I go, as opposed to making beautiful pieces that are abstract, I'm making more monsters that haunt me. And so I was trying to figure out a way to get rid of them so that I could have some sort of piece where I could go on and make things that are just a slightly different realm. I feel like I'm going deeper. I don't know what is happening, but there's something different in Parable and Monster. I'm just something going deeper. And I think it might have to do with age, and it might have to do with moving to Northfield. And it may have to be around, I have 2 sons and grandchildren, which make it very different. So my life is very different. But I have this strange space to go in a deep way. So I have my friend Jill Sands, who's the long, dark-haired girl in possibly in Michigan. She died recently, and it had a big effect on me because she was so central to my world, not just in the Jill Soanes trilogy, but much, much, much after. And I had a sense of I'd like to do a piece about her dreams. I have all of her dreams for 40 years. I would like to take them and then talk about my dreams. So I think I'd like to have it to music. So that's one of the things I'm thinking about doing next. And it's not just dreams. I would like to have visions, because I have visions.
Speaking of processing the monsters, just monsters as a concept, you've lived a long life, you've experienced many things, and your work has experienced, I think, a new audience in recent years. So perhaps before we pivot to the audience to ask their questions, I'm just maybe you could touch a little bit more on like the lives that your work, the areas that you think that you as an artist that your work still needs to traverse. So
Still needs to.
It's been traversing.
It's been traversing.
It's going.
Yeah.
It's experiencing. It's
It gets around.
It gets around.
It does. It's a surprise. It gets around. I like that. I mean, I don't have a gallery. I don't have things like that. I put things online. Well, my work is a little strange. And so it's not as though I have this, and also I make a lot, I make work a lot. I mean, it sounds like I kind of have a boring life, but I make work a lot. And so that keeps me in that little space. I edit and I film. I film in Northfield in this 200-foot space around this huge oak tree, which I love, which must have shaded cows. It has a history, I'm sure. At least I can make a history up. And I think I like having people, fans, and sometimes I get to know them. And some people write me every single year, and I start noticing that that's the same person writing. And sometimes people make work about my work. They use the music, or they do things on it, or they paint paintings, and I find that nice. And I have people writing like theses on their work, and I think those are all very satisfying. Well, I have a friend, Cecelia, asked me one time, "You're pretty happy with your work?" And I went, "Sure." Right? I mean, I can't believe that I have ever been, it's not doing, possibly Michigan is such a knockout blow that I could really, in a sense, go like, oh, there's hardly anything else to do. But I had so much to say. And I'm kind of proud to the work that I've done. I think I'm very proud of it. Actually, I feel like I have themes that are the same that run through all the things. They must be very masks, music and masks, and body parts disappearing, and landscape have somehow being important, even in possibly it's a shopping mall, and it's just like this disgusting. It was a woods once. I remember it. Just simple things that are real. Yeah.
Let's open it up to the floor. So raise your hand if you have a question, and an usher will bring a mic to you. Please wait for the mic so everyone can hear the question. I think there's one up here to my right.
Thanks for all this amazing. When you do some of the technical work, what is your favorite technical bits to work with?
Technically. I like editing. I'm really, really creative and kind of remarkable for the first half of a piece. And then I fall apart. And then I don't know what I'm doing because I'm so personally involved with the images that I actually have to have people tell me what they think. And people are always very good about telling me what to think. I'm one of these people, you should try this. So I do. And sometimes I take people's advice and sometimes I don't. But I ask people for advice. So I'm not working alone, but I'm editing alone. But I ask people for advice. And that means that as opposed to being totally alone working all the time, I'm not. I have people that I send it to. I used to have Jill Sands, and she was a tremendous loss. And I used to have Sylvia Wheeler writing songs, and when she died, I went, oh, I don't know if I want to write songs anymore, but once in a while I do. And there's a new piece, I will. Right. Does that answer your question? Yes?
Hello. I was wondering about your work has existed over such a long period, and the medium that people encounter it in has changed a lot. That we start on television screens or movie screens, and I was noticing then in A Parable of Now, it seems sort of custom made to be watched on a phone. It looks like vertical video. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering about how you've thought about how people will encounter your work very physically in that sort of material sense.
I do a little less than you would think, though. I liked it. I liked the vertical. I thought it was. I tried to do it horizontally, and I felt like it looked trite. Really trite. And so it just didn't work for me. So then someone suggested, try a vertical. And so I did. And I went, it doesn't look trite anymore. So it was really a good suggestion in terms of speaking about how I technically work and stuff. But I do know when I put things online, I don't have a magic way to do it. I just know that I plod along and somehow it gets done. Like that little ditty that Finley made for the Walker with me saying about, well, if I was working today, my work would have been much more severe. That I thought that was remarkable, but that was made for online. So I don't really make work for online. I think when I've been afraid, that song, I actually was dealing with TikTok. And that was a huge thing. I mean, for me it was. Because I had... people didn't know who I was. I mean, it wasn't nobody said this is by Cecelia Condit. It wasn't that I had the privacy, but there were always people that would figure out who I was and go to my website and find out how to contact me. And so I had a lot of people writing me, people I didn't know, and people who, there was just something in the air. It was some buzz. And then in England, there was a thing on the Tudors where they'd have this king and all the women that he was killing, and it would say, how do you meet the strangest man? They always, And that became like another wave on TikTok in England, not in America. But it became another wave that was huge for me. And I noticed because of how much mail I get.
I mean, that's the thing with the wave. It's like, I think one thing I wanted to draw out in this program is that a lot of these ideas are timeless, right? They continue to exist. I'm not going to go into that thread. I'm going to let the audience ask another question. Raise your hand if you had... Oh, someone has the mic? Okay, go ahead.
Hi. First, I just wanted to say thank you for being here and providing this opportunity. But I wanted to ask about the sound design in your work. I think it's really excellent, very intimate, and there's a lot of white noise, background noise that I think really adds to the work. And
good.
so I just wanted to ask, how do you go, like, what's your process with sound design, and how do you want to use it to enhance your work? I know that there are some people credited for sound design, some different people, so I don't know how involved you are with it, but to the extent that you are, I guess.
Yeah, I am always involved in it, but I never studied sound. So when I listen to Beneath the Skin, I go, wow, what was I thinking? I just bring home this audio recorder and one mic or another that I can get from the school, and I don't care how close it is to my mouth or how far it is. I never realized there was such a distinction, but it's in listening to it, it's one of the things that I like about the sound design in that piece, because I didn't know anything, and it's fine with me. Like, I look at the credits, and I'm just like, oh, Cecelia. But, that there's, when I got to Possibly, I still didn't know what I was doing. But one of the fellows that I worked with said, you can have a soundtrack, but there might be some nice things to put some ambient sound there too, so it's not so flat. And I went, oh, good thinking. And so that's when I started getting a little bit more sound. That's when I started some sound design in Possibly. And then when it came to Suburbs, then I was in the thick of it by then. And I feel like I do it sort of intuitively. Like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I still hear like weird sounds in all my work. Especially with this nice screen and really nice speakers, you hear everything, which is really bad. But I try to do well. And when I don't know what I'm doing, like Isaac Sherman in Parable, I sent it to him, and he like really refined it. And then the same thing was with Monster. He refined it. He didn't do the sound design. All of that was me. But he knew how to refine it in ways that I didn't have any idea about how to do. It doesn't hold me back that I don't know what I'm doing. Because last half of every piece, I don't know what I'm doing. Every single piece.
All right, one more question. Make it a good one. I'll let. Go ahead.
Hi. It's weird to hear my voice. I've been a fan of your work for several years now, and I had come to it with the Jill Sands trilogy. And as I made my way through your later work, it would always make my heart happy in a weird parasocial way to see her in the special thanks. And I'm very sad to hear of her passing. So I was wondering if you had a story or a memory of her that you'd be willing to share with us.
Oh, what a nice thing. Oh, Jill, why don't you send one down for us, please? It's so funny that I have so many memories of her. But there's one image. I was going to visit her in Arizona, and I went in a shuttle to get to where she was. And I sat in the van, and Jill came, and she had a car. It wasn't anything fancy, but she stood there, and she was wearing all black. She looked, and a red hat, some hat she'd had for 50 years. And the classic makeup that I think is the same color that Marilyn Monroe wore. So it had a name. I don't remember what the name was, but it was classic. And she was leaning against this suburban car, and someone in the van said, "Who the hell is that?" And I said, "She's my friend Jill." And they said, "Oh, you're going to have a wonderful time." And I did.
With the memory of Jill, I think that's a really good note to end on. Jill really sent down a good memory. Thank you all for joining. Hope to see you back at the cinema. And thank you again to Cecelia for her years of work. everything that she shared with us and her experiences. And yeah, thank you, Cecelia.
Thank you, Patricia.